Welcome to Magnet Minutes. It's June 7th, special edition of Magnet Minutes. And I'm very happy to have on some friends that have been on before. It's Format Cyber. This time we actually brought in the CEO, Gary Feinstein. We also have Keith, and Keith has been with us a couple times, but Keith Franco is, Keith, you'll correct me on your title. I think you're the Chief Technical uh,
the VP and Chief Security Architect.
Okay, and keeping us safe. Gary, let me just share to start with you. Obviously, I wanted to have you back on. There's so much attention on cybersecurity, and the developments, new attacks seem to be coming, and new discussions about it. You have been in the forefront of this for a long time right now. I know you've got a great reputation regionally. And so, why don't you touch maybe for a minute what makes Format Cyber a little bit different and how you're helping clients?
Sure. Yeah. So thank you for the opportunity to come on your show, Jordan. Again, we love coming here and talking with you. Format Cybers, Keith and I started the company a few years ago. We actually had met when we headed up the security and compliance operations for a global luxury retailer. This goes back about 10, 12 years ago. And that's really when cybersecurity really took off. I think it was when the Target breach hit and Home Depot and Neiman Marcus, and there was that string of cybersecurity breaches around 2014. That's when Keith and I met and really had to get involved in the architecture and security to keep a multi-billion-dollar organization safe. Fast forward, we started Format Cyber a decade later. And really, Keith and I both have the experience as engineers. We've done, pretty much a little bit of everything. There's not much we haven't seen or done, really hands-on. And so that's really the approach we take to our business. Our clients expect us to really be the experts in cybersecurity. And in order to be effective, you really have to know cybersecurity frameworks, controls, architecture, and how it's all put together and how to really provide value to an organization. So I think that's pretty inherent in the way we approach our clients. A lot of our clients we approach with a risk-based approach. We determine really what the crux of their business is, where their sensitive data is. A lot of times they don't know. And so our team comes in, identifies those areas, identifies the gaps, and responds with an approach, a plan that's easy to follow and implement. And a lot of times that's really the hard part, right? Is there's a lot of things to do to keep an organization safe. And so that's really where our expertise comes in. Is we've done it, and we have a pretty good good track record of keeping organizations safe.
Right. So Keith, let me actually turn to you for a minute because I know you work obviously a lot of the corporations you work for are large enough to have several sites. They need to coordinate among them. But now you saw a big work from home kind of boom,
Mm-hmm.
which probably put a lot more stress on a lot more companies. But what I want to do is, we hear this word cybersecurity, we hear about threats. Maybe you want to share a couple new threats that you actually came across, and without divulging secrets, how you actually help the companies patch it.
Yeah, to be fair, I'm not sure that there's a whole new classification of threats out there. It's just the continuance of what we're seeing continues to grow with ransomware attacks and also with stealthy attacks. So a lot of times when ransomware hits, they've already been on your network for months, sometimes over a year. And that's really the big gap that we're trying to help is getting companies to get to a point where they can hopefully reduce the odds that the attackers get into the network in the first place. And if they do, that they can detect their presence in days or a week or less rather than months or years. Because when they're in, what they're doing is they're learning your patterns, your technology, your people, and they're taking that info so that they can orchestrate an effective attack and a successful attack. If they don't have time to do all that mapping and legwork, that dramatically reduces the likelihood they're going to have a successful attack and be able to launch ransomware and crash your systems and steal your data.
Well, so one thing we've talked about before, I want to bring it and re-emphasize it, is you can put in the technological security. You have ways of building, I'm sure, traps and things that I don't really even understand. But sometimes it's as simple as coming in. I saw somebody actually on television last week from one of the big public companies, Zscaler.
Mm-hmm.
And what he mentioned is that through the use, I believe, of voice imitation, somebody called, said it was him, and started to give instructions to the company on what to do. So maybe, you might want to talk about a protocol. Somebody innocently says, calls up and says, "Hey, I forgot my password," or "Hey, it's Gary, and I'm in a remote site. I need my password." And then with all the work that you've done, you've just given them access through a clear back door that you probably couldn't even, come up against. So maybe you want to talk about the real 2 or 3 simple things that everyone needs to know so they don't get phished.
Yeah, and I think this really largely goes back to process for an organization to have a process in place. So if you do get somebody, whether it's through email or a voice call, like you said, where they're maybe leveraging AI to mimic somebody's voice, that if you are given a request to say, go buy gift cards and send them to this person, or please initiate a wire transfer for, $100,000 over to this entity, that there's a process in place where there are checks and balances so that it can be verified that this is a legitimate request, and you can hopefully identify it being not legitimate and then have a workflow to address that potential threat. So it's really about having clear communication paths, reinforced training in an organization, and documented process. And I think that's where a lot of especially smaller organizations are weak. They often don't think through security beyond, we have a firewall, we have antivirus, and we're paying somebody to look at it 24/7. There's a lot of layers in between there at the human level and the process level that need to be addressed as well.
Yeah,
Right.
it's funny also, the single biggest cause of breaches typically is users, right? It's they didn't
Right.
know that they shouldn't have clicked on a link, or they shouldn't have opened that email. So the best defense against that is always training. And you know what? It's usually the least expensive thing to do, but it's also one of the most over it's one of the things that organizations don't look at, and they don't spend enough time and effort into doing. You need to keep delivering the message of security across the organization to keep the company safe.
Right. So,
Yeah,
so
and
let
I'll
me
add on
follow
to
up with
that.
you. Go on.
Just
No,
real
please
quickly, a
continue.
lot of companies, when they do this, they approach it from like a compliance angle, where they may do it once per year just to say that they can do it and
Check.
tick off the box. But it's like trying to learn a foreign language by studying for 1 week per year. You're never going to master it. So we usually recommend breaking it out into monthly or at least quarterly chunks, so you get the continual reinforcement of the concepts.
Right. And that makes a world of sense. And Gary, running the company, you're not interested in checking a box. You're interested in your company working. So I know you have, and I've met a few of them, a small army like Keith, who has the deep technical experience, and I think that's the most important thing is the team. But when you go in, Gary, maybe you want to talk a little bit before you even touch things, or the whole idea, like you talked about process and training. Gary, you might want to talk about how important the training, really is from the start, and then when do you actually start to, touch the hardware?
Yeah, it really depends on the engagement or the organization. Some of them have a dedicated cybersecurity staff and need advisory services. Others bring us in to do that hands-on heavy lifting. It really depends, and that's kind of the secret of the sauce, right? Um, it's not necessarily science, not necessarily an art. It falls somewhere in between. But again, the message is the same, right? We're industry agnostic. We find that what we do pretty much translates to any organization,
Right.
public, private, We've worked in the financial sector, legal sector, manufacturing, education. It goes on and on. The principles are generally the same, right? And again, it starts with that. It starts with the buy-in from the organization, from the board of directors to the senior management, and then extends all the way down to everyone that has access to a system or data within the company. And so that's really where we try to come in. We try to be advocates for that message to say, look, you may do a really good job at education, but your control framework is lousy. You may have really good tools, but they're just not set up correctly. And that's a lot of, that's a lot of the other thing that we find is that companies that invested a lot of money, they have the best of the best, but they're either not tuned correctly or nobody's really watching them and monitoring them. And that's kind of the number two, right? Is education is first, and then two is, well, really get a good grasp on what's running on your network, and finding the anomalies in that activity.
Makes a lot of sense. So let me ask you this question. I mean, it just actually hits me while I'm listening to both of you. I wonder if, one of the keys are password access. And I think it's probably a crummy idea to have your password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But I wonder if, Keith, like at different levels through the system, there's different passwords that you actually have to use where you could have a certain access, but to get through here, it's yet another password, which would
Yep.
drive me crazy because, passwords tend to drive people crazy. But as simple as it might sound, might be one of the key things that you coach and you establish different password access at different levels of security. Does that make sense?
It does. Depending on the environment, again, and the sensitivity of the data, what you're trying to safeguard. But what you just described, it kind of brought to mind the intro to that old show, Get Smart, when there's a number of these massive vault-like doors to go through to get to where he's going. And in some cases, you need that. The most obvious is multi-factor authentication. You've probably seen that, where username, password, and then a text message or a one-time code in order to get in. And that can be applied within the network as well, where when you want to log on to a sensitive system, even though you're already logged into the network, you can set up that system to produce another challenge with a one-time code, for example. Or you could also require that system have a completely different username and login, plus a one-time code. It really comes down to the organization where they need to make a determination, the importance of that level of security versus the fluidity of their business operations. So it's always a balance between usability and security. And in some environments, you're going to have that default to absolute security, and that's just the nature of the business, and everybody knows it. But in other companies, there may be such a cultural revolt to that you have to really pick and choose where you're going to implement that control. You're going to have to really limit it to those absolute necessary systems where you're going to put that sort of control framework in place.
And I also think you're going to see a lot more reliance on the biometric controls, right? Everyone has a handheld, and most of them now have the fingerprint scanner or the face, face ID. I think the security companies are going to be leveraging that technology to really add additional security into the platforms.
Right. And that makes a ton of sense. And so what you guys drove home for me most of all today is that, I could actually buy a little software package to protect my laptop or my own computers. But in order to really protect an organization, you have to have the expertise to go in on an organizational level to address the whole team and all their computers, talking to each other. And that really, again, I know that in New Jersey, probably beyond there, you guys have a very big reputation. And I've seen, and I met some of your friends that all seem to know format, cyber as, one of the leaders in the area. So I give you a lot of credit. It's been years building this. What I wanted to do is I wanted to share, Magnet is really an investment firm, and I just love to have the expertise to reach out to specialists like yourself And I think one of the problems that I have is that your business is so hot and so interesting, that all the public companies seem to be overvalued, and so, maybe we just have to wait for the sector to cool off. But for me, understanding the sector and what's behind it, so maybe one or two small tips for some that that haven't thought through it, and I want you to be able to obviously give your contact information for people who need your service. But is there any like one tip other than password 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 is bad? Or I love the fact that you said if someone called in and said, "Hey, I'm Gary and I need you to wire this," the discussion about process. But what like maybe one mistake do you see that people just don't think of that is really secondary, to you having done so many installations?
I mean, I think at the organizational level, going back to one of Gary's earlier points, is they'll invest a lot into security products, firewalls, antivirus, EDR, etc., monitoring, but they don't really have a good way to gauge whether or not those systems are effective, until, God forbid, the attack hits. We are seeing a little bit more in validation services around that, something we offer, where we can actually come in, run simulated cyber attacks, and then grade your controls and let you know, okay, it succeeded here, but it totally missed this leg of the attack. Now here's what you can do to better tune the tool so you actually do leverage it to its best capability. So, I like to liken it to one's own health or car maintenance. You buy a car, most of us will change the oil, but a lot of us aren't so good about getting around to the 7,500 mile, the 15,000 mile, etc. tune-up maintenance schedule. And really, you need to do that. You need somebody to validate that everything is working properly, that nothing is out of date or no longer operational. And again, to Gary's point, that somebody's looking at this stuff and making sense of what the tools are telling us. So in summary, I would say, don't fall victim to the set it and forget it mindset when it comes to security.
So one other quick question before we get to contact information. So every once in a while on my screen pops up, we repelled an attack. We saw something come and you were protected. I'm curious, and I'm guessing you do, but for an individual client, can you actually show them attempted attacks that were somehow repelled by the safety net you gave to them and put around them? Can you show them instances where people try to get in and were knocked off?
You mean like with a home user?
With your corporations, like
Oh, yeah.
with your clients, it's the same way I get on my laptop. You could show them in their bigger system.
Sure.
Some people have been trying to hit in and have
Yep.
been knocked off.
Yeah. So Jordan, really one of our services that's really taking off is our SOC services. So it's Security Operations Center. Um, Really, every company, you need some sort of a SOC, right? And really, the crux of the SOC is your SIEM, your Security Incident Event Monitor, and that
Mm.
SIEM is basically taking the logs from all of your systems, whether it's your firewalls, your antivirus platforms, your domain controllers, your proxy servers, all of these systems, and it brings them together. It centralizes them into one database. And we have our threat intelligence and AI that runs on top of it to essentially filter out all the white noise to alert the client that, hey, yeah, your firewalls are under attack now. Or user, John Doe, who's traveling right now, just came across some malicious code. So those are things that, again, you have to know about to run an effective security program. And the Format Cyber SOC makes that really easy for the organization. A lot of times for some organizations, we're processing, it could be 1 billion logs in a week. You see the vastness of the data, and really to find the anomalous activity can be very difficult if you don't use a SOC. In fact, it's almost impossible if you don't have a SIEM or a SOC at some level.
Yeah. And that's an expression I never even heard before. So I'm sure that everyone listening has just learned something as well. And so the key here is, for whatever reason, criminals should get into good businesses, but for some reason, some smart people have that kind of nefarious criminal mind. And it's great to know that we got smarter people, protecting the seams. So, with that, let's do this, Gary or Keith. You want to share either your website or where they're going to find you if they want more information?
Sure. Our website is www.formatcyber.com, all one word. You can also search for us on LinkedIn. We have a company page set up under Format Cyber. Both our individual accounts are there as well if you want to connect with us and ask any questions. And on our website, we have additional email and phone contact info as well.
Right. Okay. Fabulous. And so I know you spell your name Cyber a little unusually. I don't know if they need to put, the colon between the letters, but I want them to be able to find you, because having a secure network and not be taken down by the bad guys is, the essence of big business, small business and individuals. So I thank you for your time again. It's Cyber Format, Friends of Magnet Investing, Friends of Magnet Minutes. And thanks again, both Keith and Gary, for your time today.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jordan.
Jordan.
It
Been a
was great. It
pleasure.
was great being on again.
Fantastic. Okay, so wrapping up, it's Jordan Kimmel with Magnet Minutes. It's June 7th. And I'm glad we had a special guest, Cyber Format. We'll see you soon.